Welcome back to Pod by the Bay, presented by your good friends at the Bay Area Examiner, and especially during this time of year, your very good friends at Homefield Apparel. You can use our code BA15 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. They've got a lot of cool stuff going. They do like mystery boxes and things like that, especially around March Madness. They also release a ton of new stuff. I've seen shooting jackets, things of that nature coming out the last week. You're seeing coaches rep home field a lot in these press conferences and these videos that get made. I know I just saw Calipari. They said Calipari won because of home field magic because he was wearing his Arkansas quarter zip. They have USF quarter zips, all kind of stuff like that. And if it's your first time ordering at homefieldapparel.com, you can use code BAE15 for 15% off your first order, or use our affiliate link in the description. So I don't think we had that affiliate link up in our live show we did this past weekend after the brackets were revealed for the women's March Madness, women's NCAA tournament. Steeg, but we did talk about it at length. USF, we were the night before, kind of the big game. They play tomorrow night against 5 seed Tennessee. After kind of just looking, and we're going to go really in depth in the Ponderosa with some stats, but just kind of after looking through Tennessee a little bit, thoughts on the game, thoughts on the seeding, anything that kind of sticks out to you?
Yeah, I mean the key thing to I guess look for at this point is USF is becoming kind of that trendy 12/5 upset that you see a lot. There's usually when you start getting into the March Madness kind of things, usually there's about probably four upsets that people look at, both on the men's and the women's side of things. So on the men's side of things, a lot of people were circling that McNeese State Clemson game. Some people were circling the North Carolina being in a play-in game against San Diego State. They were also circling that North Carolina Ole Miss is in a potential upset. So USF is kind of falling into that same category of being a trendy pick there, and I think it's for a good reason. The matchup itself. I mean, if you look at the metrics hate USF in this matchup. I think it's 95% chance of win for Tennessee.
Yeah, if you look at, I'll throw up real quick because
this
isn't really advanced metrics, but I'll throw up kind of the ESPN. If you're doing the women's tournament challenge, what their bracket says. So, 90. They have with all these factors, they have Tennessee with a 92% chance to win. USF obviously with an 8% chance to win. The closest is the seed difference, which is kind of historical. Now, it's not as common as it is in the men's bracket for 12 seeds to upset, but the last 10 years, the last 10 tournaments, 25% of the time, you've got a 12 seed advancing to the second round. So it happens. It's not as quite as often as the men's side, but so that's where you see that kind of the seed difference thing. Now, I think they do have a stat in here about since 2019, 5 seeds are 93 and 27. So it's pretty against 12 seeds. Last year they were 4-0, which was the first time since 2019. So maybe a 12 is due this year. But you kind of see all the numbers. I think Tennessee's a team that plays they should be metric darlings the way they play.
Right.
So
that's the fun part about it. And we'll get into fully in-depth conversation about women's basketball when we get to the Ponderosa, if you're subscribed to that. But there is reasons to like USF here. There's also reasons to absolutely fade USF by the 20-point spread that it currently is sitting at right now. There's the potential for the upset, and there's the potential of just the barns being blown off the doors.
Yeah, so. Right now, according to ESPN Bet, which I don't think is very great, but they probably are pretty close to the consensus lines. The total is 146.5, with Tennessee favored by 18.5 points. So big spread. But like you said, kind of the reason there's some reason for optimism with that large spread is the way Tennessee plays. If you watch just their little preview, like ESPN puts out like a 16-second preview for every team in the tournament, like just so when you're making your bracket pick, you can look. Looking at their stats, I thought this, but then their expert came on, and his 16-second preview was basically Tennessee could go to the Final Four or they could lose in the first game. Because they rely so much on shooting threes and pressing and turning people over. They're very kind of variable in how they play. There's a wide range of outcomes for Tennessee basketball. Not too dissimilar to probably their offense in football, where you kind of sometimes it looks awesome and then sometimes it looks bad. It kind of depends on if they're hitting their layups and things like that in football. But basketball wise, high variance. So the metrics are going to like them because they turn people over a lot. They play a lot of possessions. They play fast and they shoot a lot of threes. They're not. So that's interesting, though. They're not a great 3-point. They have some great shooters, but as a team, they're not a great 3-point shooting team. They're not a very good free throw shooting team. And they rely, I think, on turning people over, which USF has done a pretty good job of not getting turned over. Now, as someone who's watched more closely, Steeg, how do you think constant press will affect USF? I've seen some where, I feel like I've seen a couple games where they try to press and Mama is able to kind of negotiate her way out of it pretty easily. Sometimes you get those guards that are like one-man press breakers. How do you think USF will be able to handle the press constantly? I'm sure they've worked on it a ton, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that I guess we'll tease a little bit of what we've heard on the Ponderosa here is that USF understands that is what Tennessee is going to do. Is Tennessee is going to put constant pressure, especially because it's no secret that Jose's probably going to go with like maybe a 7-player rotation here. So, it's abundantly clear that if you pressure, maybe get someone into foul trouble, that you might be able to put a crack into it and just kind of get up early and kind of keep the pressure on. So we'll talk more about that in the Ponderosa. But, I think both sides are very much aware of their own strengths and weaknesses, as well as their opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Tennessee is very deep as a team, and USF isn't. It's no secret. I don't think either. There's no secrets. We're not going to show our spring game to any sort of retaliation or anything like that. We're in the NCAA tournament, baby. Like, this is like everyone knows you have almost 40 games worth of film on these players. Their tendencies. Yeah. They can make left-handed layups or not at this point. So,
yeah, it sounds cliche, but this really does seem like it's a total whose style wins out type of game. I think USF style could win out and USF could still possibly lose. I don't see USF winning a shootout, a running gun shootout. I just don't think they have enough shooting for it. But I think this is definitely a game that USF could frustrate Tennessee. But like we said, it's a wide range of possible outcomes, which when you're the underdog, that's good. You'd like for there to be a wide range of possible outcomes. May end up getting crushed with an 18.5-point spread, or Tennessee's a little cold. You frustrate them a little bit, you get the win. Then if you do that, you'll be playing probably the regional host there in Ohio State. But should be an interesting matchup nonetheless. We'll talk more about it. We've got some advanced numbers to look at on the women's side here. In the Ponderosa, Steeg, let's move on from women's basketball, the big game coming up. Let's talk about something that just ended. So we had, I believe, indoor track season, correct? just came to a close, and USF had some nice performances in there. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I guess the best way to describe this is that the indoor season is not as big because it's usually, the up north teams will play host, and the Windy City Invitational indoors, the Boston University Invitational indoors, and all this other stuff. So it's usually for these northern schools, and so the events are a little bit different. You don't get the traditional like 100 meters, 110-meter hurdles or anything like that, but it's still really important. It is almost the warm up for the outdoor season where everyone comes down to the south and everyone competes in like Austin and Gainesville and the big schools and everything. So USF in the indoor had probably, and I didn't go back and check, but I think, and I am pretty confident in this, had their most successful indoor season by far. The women competed extremely well at the AAC Indoor Championships. They ended up, I think, in third. They had a great showing at many of the track events, and then also performed well in a few of the field events. They're still kind of in there, hitting their strides and everything as far as coming up to a team. But the men's just absolutely crushed the competition at the indoor for the AAC. They set they didn't set a record, but in all, I mean, we can go into the advanced details, but they basically scored the most amount of points as a team for this level of competition. You get a certain amount of points. If you get first, you get 10 points. If you get second, you get 8, so on and so forth. And they got the most amount of points for this level of competition, where they had like 5 or 6 guys competing in the final 8. And so they were able to secure Kobe Babin in pole vault, and then Saminu Abdul Rashid in the 60-meter sprint into competing for the NCAA indoors, which is, again, it's not as competitive. There's no Southeast regional and then the East regional and then national championship thing. This is purely, are you one of the best 16 athletes at indoor, period. And so for USF to get 2 is incredible. And so at the indoors, Kobe Babin, actually, I'll save Kobe Babin for a second because I want to very much talk about him in particular. Saminu Abdul Rashid did what he has been doing this entire time, which is just blazing records on the track side of things. He was able to qualify on his Friday night, getting one of the top 2 times on his heat to secure a place in the finals, and then he ended up getting 4th, I think, in the actual finals. So a top 8 finish in the NCAA indoors results in being quote unquote first team All American.
And the top 4 was pretty. I think one was a little bit out in front, but the next 3 spots were really, really tight.
Yeah, and you're talking 60 meters. This is, I mean, when they were going through the top 32, so that's including the 16 people that didn't make it, you're looking at like 0.01 seconds between the person who qualified at 16th and the person who didn't qualify at 25th.
What a loser.
Right. Like marginal. And I joked and I posted it. I said, if you are not paying attention at 6:18 p.m. on the dot, you will miss the 60-meter finals because it goes by that quick. And so, he finished in the top half. He's a first-team All-American. Phenomenal showing by him. That is exactly what USF is kind of hoping for when we start transitioning more towards the outdoor, where he's going to have to extend his mark by 40 more meters. God bless him. So great showing by him. But I really want to talk about Kobe Babin. He did it. Like, and I think that's probably the simplest way to put it. So he came in marginal as like an outside shot of placing. in the pole vault at that point. So they have them all ranked by their career best indoor. I think he was coming in at like 7th or something like that. Different meets have different pole vault marks, and some of them do by the inches, some of them do by the meters. It's kind of tricky. A lot of these guys that were competing on the indoor were also competing internationally too. Um, so, Kobe was kind of, I mentioned, was going to be an outside shot at a podium finish. It was definitely possible for him, but it would take a lot. And he did it. To put it bluntly, he ended up finishing second, a national runner up in indoor pole vault. He not only surpassed his personal best once, he surpassed it twice. So he came into that meet with a personal best at 5.54 meters. He surpassed that at 5.56 meters. Not much of a difference. And then was able to secure a podium finish at 5.61 meters. And then because of the amount of jumps that he did, he actually ended up finishing second because the other guys just didn't have enough jumps left, and he was able to secure his spot there. The guy that ended up getting first, I don't want to get into the technical jargon of track because it's so well far gone, but he used a pass attempt to get into first place. All he had to do was make an attempt at 5.7 meters. No one else was going to attempt it. He made his attempt, didn't get it, and then, rest was history. So overall, 2 first-team All-Americans for USF in track and field, and this is preseason for all intents and purposes. This is the BS that happens before we get into the real fun of the outdoor season. So for USF to get these podium finishes already is a really good sign for track and field to continue their dominance that we've been seeing in the American Athletic Conference.
Well, there we go. Really good breakdown there from Mr. Steeg. So let's move on to. I don't have too much to add. Just it's crazy how thin the margins are in track. It's so tough. Let's talk some softball and some baseball real quick. So softball's been doing pretty well. They are the last. So D1 softball puts out mid-major rankings. USF is 5th in their week 6 rankings, which came out the 19th. So yesterday, as of the time of this recording, and they also are in the field. The projected field is 64 right now as of yesterday, according to D1softball.com. They have them as 3 seed in the Tallahassee region. But Steeg, softball's been moving right along.
Yeah, they have. They are on a 9-game win streak as of recently. So had a few midweek matchups. They had a really unfortunate bad loss against UAB way back on March 7th. They were leading, I think, 6-1 on a Friday night game going into the 7th inning and blew it. Just straight up blew it. But ever since then, just absolutely on fire. Ended up taking the last 2 games against UAB, midweek matchups against Bryant, Central Michigan, won them in one against Bryant in one against Bryant in a run rule, and then one against Central Michigan in extra innings, and then swept Charlotte at Charlotte, which Charlotte was actually like an RPI fiend at that point. I think they were coming in at like 60th. So ends up being a really good looking win for USF, even though I don't think Charlotte is that great this year. And then coming off a doubleheader victory against Stetson last night, actually on Wednesday night, played 2 games there. Only gave up 1 run against a pretty paltry Stetson team. So they're looking good. They're, to put it bluntly, we did a little, early season preview on USF softball. The consensus that we had was that we knew they were going to be really good at defense, which they have been. Seldom a few errors here and there. They've been pretty on par, getting a lot of double plays and, showering up some runs and making sure, some girls don't get any extra base hits. we knew that the pitching was going to be good to elite, leaning more on the good side of things than elite. They still have their issues giving up extra base hits. A little bit of regression, but USF seems to have about 3 capable pitchers right now, which is a benefit. Usually they only have like one. Just not a lot of consistency out of their starting pitching at this point. But the biggest surprise has been that they're hitting the crap out of the ball, like unbelievably well.
Yeah, a couple cool notes on that. Tied for first in the NCAA with 60 doubles, and eighth in the NCAA with 279 hits. So much better. And then if you get into kind of the conference categories, they're leading a ton of categories, including batting average, RBIs, scoring, all that kind of stuff. So total runs and walks. So the bats, which have been like, I feel like the last few years, that's been kind of the big question mark. Is you've had some, it feels like the past 4-5-ish years, you've had really good pitching, and you haven't quite been able to string everything together. But they're hitting the ball really well right now.
Yeah, which is, to me, I would rather this team be able to. I mean, their last 3 games were all run rule victories. I'd rather my team be able to get run rule victories than to just be in like 1-0 pitching duels. At one side of things, yes, you are a little bit more capable of having like just like a very cold night hitting, which USF is no stranger to that. They've had some bad losses because of it, where they just can't get a hit. I think famously, me and Chris Hadley in our Discord against Kent State, USF was losing like 3-0 going into like the 5th inning, and then just all of a sudden just scored 8 runs out of nowhere. And I think I'd rather my team be able to do that than the last like 2 years where it's like, all right, it's 1-0. USF got a run because
they walked the bases loaded and somebody got hit.
Yeah, it's something stupid or whatever. And then you're just kind of just desperately trying to hold on to a lead like that. I think I'd rather this USF team be like, oh, we're down 5-0, but Alex Wilkes can hit like a 3-run home run and just flip the game on its head, which she's done so many times this year. So this USF team is going to be very dangerous. The AAC is a little loaded this year. There's like 5 teams that I think can compete for first between ECU, USF, Wichita State, FAU, and North Texas. So I think there's a lot of dangerous moments that USF might get into, which will make the AAC conference tournament a lot more fun. But so long as USF doesn't completely flub it for the rest of the year, they should be in. The unfortunate part is at this point, the resume can no longer be padded outside of the conference. You have a series against ECU, a series against Wichita State, a series against FAU, series against Tulsa, and a series against Memphis. That's USF's schedule from now until April, late April. And then they play at Florida. So your resume as of right now purely depends on, can you handle your conference opponents? And that's where I think a Ken Erickson coach team can really come into play and hopefully do well. Is you have the ability, everything is in your hand at this point. You are, I think, tied first in the conference, or maybe second at 5-1. If you handle your business, if you just take care of yourself, USF should be able to play in for an at-large. But you can't live for the mistakes that this team has kind of made at times. You can't have, oh, we had a bad weekend or we had a bad inning against UAB and we lost. There's no more of that. You have to handle business. You have to win a couple games against Florida Atlantic. You have to win a couple games against Wichita. You have to be able to sweep a team like Memphis, who is pretty bad, and get yourself into the postseason play regardless of what the AAC tournament looks like.
Yeah. So weekend series coming up against ECU next. Good chance to kind of get going in the conference really get it going there. USF baseball. We'll move on to baseball. 3-game series against UAB coming up to open up conference play. Baseball's been a couple. It seems like the Villanova losses weren't too great, but other than that, you're on a 4-game win streak right now, heading into conference play. RPI wise, we were talking about this before. You are right now 61st in D1 baseball's RPI, with the 24th strength of schedule. So you've played a pretty tough schedule. And that's been that's we look at the quads. They've 0-1 in the quad 1 games, 4-3 in quad 2 games, 2-1 in quad 3. But you've got those 3 quad 4 losses, which are holding them back a little bit. But all in all, baseball's been pretty good. I think Villanova would probably be amongst those quad 4 losses. They're 115th in RPI right now. So coming off of 2 wins against Maryland and 2 wins against Florida Gulf Coast. Steeg, where you at with baseball? It seems like you've had some pretty good performances from some individual guys that are kind of up near the top of the conference stat registers. Where do you sit with baseball? New head coach, new staff, bunch of new players. How are you feeling about their season so far?
When I asked around, because baseball is usually pretty easy to predict. Like, you either have good pitchers or good bats, or you don't. Like, there's not really any question about it. The thing that I kept on hearing about USF baseball was like, they'll be fine. Like, they'll make it work. And I think that's kind of the microcosm of the season. And I think blissfully and thankfully they are probably going to get a little bit of a reprieve for their mistakes this year. That Villanova series loss that you just mentioned, like, arguably pretty bad, but then the Maryland series win, arguably pretty good. You have 2 wins against Big Ten opponents. You looked pretty good against like Florida State, Georgia Southern. You've had some pretty good wins here and there. I know a lot of people had a sour taste in their mouth after the UCF series, but we're coming to find out that this UCF team might be like not just good, but like top 5 in a lot of metrics good. So you're kind of looking at this team through a very weird lens because Mitch Hannes loves to schedule tough, where you're like, they might be good. Like, they could be good. They have, I think, when I count the bullpen, like 6 really capable arms, and then like 9 arms that can do pretty good. And then you have some guys that just aren't. And I've made those guys abundantly clear in our Ponderosa section if you're ever curious. So I think this team is exactly achieving more than they should, but not overachieving, if that makes sense. Like, the bats are wonderful this year. Sebastian Grieco, wonderful. Ryan Pruitt is great. You're getting a lot of really good timely hits, especially in 2-out scenarios. I don't have the metrics off the top of my head, but this team is really getting 2-out hits. They're scoring in bunches whenever they get the opportunity. Guys like Marcus Brodell, Jackson Mayo, the holdovers, that if you will, they're able to do just enough this year.
Yeah, Brodell is, I think, top 10 or he's pretty close to top 10 in batting average in the conference so far this year, batting 349. Matt Rose is also up there. I don't know. He doesn't have a ton of as many plate appearances, but he's in the kind of the top 20 range as well. So, they've got some guys that are hitting it too.
Yeah, and that's the blessing because USF has capable hitters on this team. It's really just like the bullpen when you get a little deeper into like a 3-game series that kind of gets a little hairy. But the positive part of that is that you have some really capable young freshmen Jack Nedro has been a wonderful insurgence. Nolan Bernard is a true freshman. He's like 17 years old, and he's just lights out. Corey Braun, obviously,
Is that the literal baby?
Yeah, little baby.
The literal baby. Corey Braun has. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned him. He's another guy that's like, if you look at kind of just, all right, let's see where some of these guys stack up in conference. He's kind of all over he's kind of near the top of a bunch of metrics in conference in terms of pitching. He's top 10 in the ERA in the conference. I think he's second in innings pitched in the conference. And looks like he's top 10 in batting average against as well. So like he's having a really good year by almost all metrics. He's also top 10 in strikeout percentage. So yeah, he seems to be having a great year.
We need to talk about one pitcher in particular. Bryce Archie.
Ever heard of him?
Never heard of this guy? I mean, we'll be candid for a second. We had heard multiple times that he had unbelievable high fastball rates. Like he could touch like 93, I think is what they said. But just that control was the problem. Like he could throw 93, but he's throwing it at the net. He's looking really, really good.
Yeah, he's almost pitched as many innings this year as he did all last. So last year he had 13 appearances and 17.2 innings pitched. This year he's and his ERA. So I'll give you some of last year numbers so you can talk improvement here. 13 appearances, win-loss record 0-2. That's not always super indicative of anything. ERA 8.15, 16 earned runs, 14 walks, 18 Ks, a 3.82 batting average against. This year, 4 appearances, 3 starts, 17 innings pitched, 2.65 ERA, 18 Ks, so as many Ks as last year, and a 2.62 batting average against. So almost over like 120-point drop in batting average against him, and obviously a gigantic drop in earned run average. So, and maybe he got a little bit unlucky last year, but his strikeout percentage has gone up. His strikeouts to walks have gone up. His walk percentage has gone down. He's just improved in every possible category by a decent margin.
Yeah, I mean, he's been unbelievable in his appearances so far. To the point where I'm sitting here thinking like, do I want him as my Saturday starter, or do I want him as my backup quarterback? Because he's a serviceable backup. He's not great. He's serviceable. But man, he got 6 really good innings out of him in the Maryland series. Brandon Keister opened for him, so it was kind of different. Like Keister got 3 innings, and then Bryce came in and shut the door from there on forward. But like, you shut down like one of the hottest hitting teams in the country for 6 full innings. Like, I am not in Bryce Archie's circle. I would tell him, hey Bryce, I think if you want a potential draft pick, you probably could get picked up by a squad, because he still has that fastball that, I mean, he's touched it a few times this year.
I think he's touched 95, right? Hasn't he this season?
Yeah, he touched 95 against who did we play midweek that one week? Florida State. He touched 95 against Florida State. Like, buddy, like let's have a career talk for a second. Like, I think we have enough capable quarterbacks on the roster that I would feel okay with Bryce setting himself up to potentially be like, a 9th round draft pick for like the Rangers or something like that. Just spitballing.
Yeah, it's good to see him have a good year. One of the coolest things that's come out this whole kind of off season to me, it's always fun, is to watch the football team go watch him pitch.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. So all the videos on that are tons of fun. Speaking of football, we'll end spring practice starting up next week. Correct, Steve?
Yes. Spring practice.
I believe it starts the 25th.
Behind me.
That was
She is wired up right now. Yes, the 25th.
So spring practice will start up next Tuesday, and we'll have some previews, either in the Ponderosa or we'll see. There's a lot to talk about right now. So Pod by the Bay kind of gets chock full, and we're still missing things. So, but spring football starts next week, and I know that's kind of a lot of people. We did a poll in the Discord, and that seems to be a lot of the people that are active in the Discord. It's football's number one. So we'll definitely be talking some spring football coming up here pretty soon. I'm sure we'll get chances to talk with Coach Golish and get that going. But Steeg, that's it for this week of Pod by the Bay. Any final thoughts before we head to the Ponderosa to talk some advanced stats? Oh, also in the Ponderosa, maybe a little men's basketball coaching search talk. So maybe. if you've made it this far, check out the Ponderosa. You can join us on Patreon. You can get the Ponderosa section of the Discord for $5 a month. That's basically, access to our insider message board. And I know pretty much all the insider message boards seem to be about $10 a month. You can have ours for half of that price. For $10 a month, you get the insider Discord. You also get extra episodes of the podcast every week, or at least seemingly 4 times a month. Sometimes we double up. And then during football season, there seems to be even more content. So if you want that extra episode of the podcast and the insider message board Discord access, where Steeg has already posted some of his coaching search nuggets, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Bay Area Examiner. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.